You should, but I think
You
it's...
better read the Cal Government Code, the public employee.
Cal Government Code. Holy shit, what is that?
I don't think it says.
How do you pronounce S over S?
You don't. Section.
It's SOL as a matter of fact.
SOS.
We're in trouble.
Oh, gosh.
Save our section.
Second time, you know.
All right, Chris, he's turning on the camera, so
Remember that-
no more
remember what we
swearing.
tried to do with regards
roll,
to the
please.
EIR,
Yep.
same things next.
Okay, welcome to the Tuesday, March 10 meeting of the Coastside County Water District. Joanne, roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Director Coverdale?
Fairly present.
Vice President Glassberg?
Here.
Director Reynolds?
Here.
Director Flint?
Here.
President Michelson?
Here. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll pass it down. Each person makes a fold of it by the time it gets to the end.
Pretty little bird that they have the public.
Okay, and are we,
Public comment.
yeah, is it not as an agenda item, so. Otherwise it's an agenda item.
Right, it's not.
We hear it then. Okay, I'm seeing, well, public speaker slip, I haven't seen one of these in a good year. We can now hear Chad Hooker's opinion on the main replacement, which is always looking forward to here.
Okay, I just wanted to mention to you guys that I live at the corner of San Benito and Kelly. San Benito's parallel to Main and 2 blocks east of it. The last 150 feet or so of Kelly Street was last paved just after the Civil War or some such time. It's been trashed. There's a water main that runs down that street that's a 2-inch main, and it has leaked 4 times in the 25, 28 years I've been there. Each time water's bubbling out of what's left of the street, I call the water district and they run down there and dig it up, and they put some sort of a sleeve or a patch or a squeeze on it, but they don't replace the pipe. Sometimes they put 3 or 4 of these patches in a 5-foot section, and I say to them, what's going on here? And they say, well, we're not allowed to replace 2-inch mains. All the mains we put in have to be 4 inches or larger. So I don't know about that. I don't know anything about that. I also think that it's possible that the main that it connects to in San Benito Street is a 2-inch. I don't know about that. But I'm going to lean on City Council this year to pave that street. They've been going around painting the streets with gravel and tar for the last couple of years, and they've said that when they finish that project, their intention is to actually take on some of the badly deteriorated streets. And mine is awful. I'm not just complaining about a few cracks. There's nothing there. Each time the Water District has dug it up, it's gone on to Andrini's patch list, and it's never happened. I mean, it's a complete mess. You can't ride a bicycle on it. You'll get trashed. So I don't know if there's a 2-inch, 4-inch rule, if there's something going on, if there's anything the board has to do with this. But I have this sneaking suspicion that after all these years, the city's going to pave the street, and the following month, the Water District's going to come out and dig a trench down the middle of it, which I don't think would be very cool. So if there's a way to coordinate that, Dave did mention to me once that the city and the Water District do coordinate what's being paved and what's being patched or repaired. But there seems to be some sort of a link or loop about 4-inch and 2-inch, and I don't know where that is, but I'm just here to let you know that I hope you don't dig up the street as soon as it gets finally fixed. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Joe, is that on our capital improvement, do you know?
That is on the downtown main replacement, part of the CIP for that. It's out a couple of more years. And yeah, we're very much aware that that's a problem. We'd really like to replace that main, but, you know, like I said, we have, it's on a schedule.
Good.
But I'm surprised that it's not paid better than it was after the repairs.
Well, it just never got fixed, but, you know, quite honestly, the main runs, I'd say less than 2 feet off the curb, and what's been dug up in there is sort of put back with compacted gravel, and that's not really the problem. The whole rest of the street is just...
This is before the bridge, right?
No, this is Kelly Street. There is no bridge, so it's the last 150 feet of the street. It's just trash. But there are only 3 I believe the new Pastorino residence that was put in across the creek went on a main that comes off of Miramontes, and I think at that time the adjacent residence there was transferred onto that main too. So there's now an abandoned water meter box at the end of Kelly. And as far as I know, there's my house and 2 others on that. I mean, the 2-inch main is totally suitable. I just don't know if you need to return it. Or why you do a 4 or an 8 or 12. It's
6.
Great, thank you.
Is our CIP online? Is the capital improvement plan online?
Yes.
Yeah, you can actually go online and see the date in our capital improvement projects listing. You can actually see when your project is on the schedule. So you might look at that. I mean, I would tell you if I could find it real quick.
But if the
And read
city,
it.
yeah, if the city's is going to pave the street, we'll try to move our schedule up. We don't want to pick up a
Historically,
new
we've always
street.
worked with the county and the
Yeah.
city.
Yeah, it's pretty good, but it's not
Try it.
perfect. So
Yeah.
it's good to bring it up.
Well, yeah, I just hope it gets coordinated because the city sort of.
Yeah, well,
does it.
we've been in business here for a good 50 years, and we have
Oh, I know you
pretty,
guys are
pretty
for
good
real.
communication with the city and county.
Okay.
I mean, it's not our first rodeo here. Thank you. Moving on to a special order of business. We'd like to introduce Mary Rogren here to Coastside County Water District.
Thank you.
Dave, you want to give a?
Well, yes, it's my pleasure to introduce Mary Rogren, our new District Assistant General Manager. This was a really lucky thing for me and for the district. I ran into Mary and I have known each other for quite a while. Mary first moved to the coast in 1982, so she's been a Coastside resident. She had a little break, but continuous since 1991, I think. So she's a Coastside resident. I ran into her. I know she's a financial person. I said, we're looking for somebody. Do you know anybody? And she said, well, I might be interested in a change. And so one thing led to another, and here she is. She has been, I knew Mary as a financial person when I first started my career in contract operations at a company called Envirotech Operating Services in Belmont. We ran water and wastewater systems for cities under contract, and we had a really great financial group. Mary was one of 3 or 4 people in the financial group at that point. So she's had quite a bit of a career since then, but she really wanted to shorten her commute, which is a lucky thing for us. So we really, I think, are very fortunate to have somebody of her experience and background on board, and she's already dug into the budget and asked us a whole lot of tough questions. This is day 5, and we haven't scared her off yet with all of our many challenges, which we'll be talking about later tonight. So I'd like the board to join me in welcoming Mary, and we have some cookies, and you can get acquainted. This is one of our opportunities to take a break and do something a little less formal to welcome a new person to the district. So,
Any directors have any questions or comments or? Director
Welcome aboard.
Well, thank you.
I just
I'm
wanted
glad to be
to comment that I was fortunate to sit on the interview panels for the position, and we interviewed, I don't know, 5 or 6 different people, and Mary was far and away the best candidate that came forward. So I'm just really pleased to have you with us, and I think you'll find this is a great organization to work for. If you can kind of stay away from the board. You never, the board's a little dicey, but the rest of the group is pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, some of the boards don't.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, and when Dave shared your name with me, I gave him the nod.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be a good fit. And I'm also on the HR subcommittee, but I missed the interview. But I knew that Arnie would bless your hiring, so thank you.
Thank you, and glad to be here.
Yeah, we're just so glad you're going to come with solutions to all of our financial.
Oh, yes.
It's a challenging year, and we know you're going to fix it, so it's a terrific feeling to have someone to focus directly on that aspect of our operation. The district has grown so much. I mean, I've only had about 20 years' experience with it, but, you know, it really started out as a district where a couple of individuals used to go out and turn valves on and off to run water up and down the coast. I mean, it was pretty prehistoric, and a lot of the pipelines were World War II vintage pipes, and so it's amazing to watch the facility grow. The water treatment plants in this district are some of the most sophisticated, I think, in the state of California. And, you know, our other brother and sister water agencies simply buy water from San Francisco, put it into a pipe and mark up the price and run their operation. And here we treat water in 2 locations. We draw water from multiple local sources. We're connected to the Hatch Hatchie system. It's just grown to be a really sophisticated district in a very small community with a lot of physical challenges. So it's been really fun to watch it grow and become more and more professional with a wonderful staff and great general manager. And so it's nice to fill a position like yours. It's great to see that happen. And we just want to make sure you can run the Nunes water treatment
Yes.
plant in an emergency. Hope you're going to get all your water treatment plant operator certifications.
You get her a hard hat, too.
Well, I did take the wastewater operator treatment course back in 1982, so.
All right.
Fantastic, wow.
Yeah, we give, a little pay incentives for those. You'll be up to a D3, T3 in no time.
Backhoe, can you run a backhoe?
Okay, so after those comments, we're going to take a little break, and I see we have some non-alcoholic champagne there. No one has sparkling apple juice? Thank you. That's just what I needed.
Yeah, after refreshments.
Sugar to get
Sugar levels are back up.
Sugar levels back up, attention spans back on.
Man, we made some real deals with Jack.
Thank you.
Plastic pipe half inch.
Moving forward to the, we are rolling, correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Are
moving
we,
forward
are we
to-
supposed to use these things? Because they turn red when you push the button.
No, they're
We're
voice
not supposed to
activated.
touch
That's
it.
mute.
Yeah, that's mute.
It's a no touch.
It's
Oh, no,
voice
he
Oh,
touched
activated.
he missed the training session. He was
It's,
last.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's voice
voice-
activated.
Voice activated.
Hello. Nothing happened.
Moving
Did you hear
forward,
him back there?
yeah, moving forward to consent. It was my month to review the claims, and I found them to be in order. Any other directors have any questions or items they would like to pull for further discussion?
I move we approve the consent calendar as presented.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Joanne, please.
Yes. Director Coverdell?
Aye.
Vice President Glassberg?
Aye.
Director Reynolds?
Aye.
Director Flint?
Aye.
President Michelson?
Aye.
I'd just like to mention one thing having to do with the information in the consent calendar material. Director Coverdell requested that we show in our production that we distinguish local from imported water. And local water can be San Francisco or our district-owned sources. And we're also distinguishing district-owned from non-district-owned. So the green is all local source water. Local source water includes Pilarcitos Lake. And the blue is imported, comes from east of the ridge, I guess you'd say. And the sort of shaded is SFPUC, so Pilarcitos Lake and Crystal Springs. And down at the bottom, we have a summary. So, so far, let's see, are these, oh no, we have both annual and monthly figures. So, or year-to-date figures, local versus imported, 95% local versus 4.8% imported. And then we have also the figures for CCWD versus SFPUC for the month and for the year-to-date. And that color coding, which isn't entirely obvious when you first look at it, but is pretty informative, is the work of Mr. Gustino.
Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thanks.
So there's a lot of good information there.
Great color selection, I might add.
Just wanted to let you know, we are listening.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Moving forward to meetings attended, director comments. I did see a reimbursement for Director Reynolds.
No, it's upcoming.
Oh, it's upcoming?
Yep.
Oh, okay, oh, yes, yeah, it is March 25th. Oh, typically we see them in looking back. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, this
Can be
is-
either way.
Okay. Well, good, we expect a full PowerPoint presentation after. No. It's not in the Bahamas or anything, is it? No?
It's in Sacramento, and it's,
like the Bahamas.
it's discussing the drought and the state's response thereof. And if anybody wants a ride, they're welcome to join
you
me,
couldn't
but
pay me enough to go to
it will be
Sacramento.
ugly.
Thank you, thank you.
It will be
Thank you for
ugly.
going to Sacramento for us.
Just get combat pay.
Oh, but the other part that will be interesting is they're talking about the groundwater rule, and it will be fascinating to see how the players line themselves up for that.
Yeah, no, will be. Thank you. Anyone else have anything to bring from anything they've attended?
I did a little snowpack research.
What's
and,
snow?
I can tell you that you got to get to 9,000 feet
Yeah.
before it starts to look solidly white.
Yeah, mountain bike trails are at 7,000 feet are all open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. 22% of normal, average normal snowpack. That's where we sit right now. It's pretty scary. I didn't mean to impose in your discussion, okay.
No, I appreciate it.
But it was really,
Personal.
it was really interesting to see because typically this time of year, there's so much snow loaded on the north slopes of the Sierra that it looks like the biggest water reservoir you've ever seen. And this year, not only is it thinner, but that's causing all of the snow that is there to be melting. And the temperatures have been 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit during the day. So it's already running. I mean, I just can't remember seeing it quite like that in the Sierra. So it's pretty scary. And you notice that all these storms that have been coming in have actually been missing us a little bit and swooping back into the Sierra, which is really an interesting kind of weather pattern. But it's not dumping very much, and it's, boy, it's peculiar. It's really different.
Yeah, no, it's pretty bleak, and we're waiting this, SFPUC is in the driver's seat here. Well, we shall see what they have to say. And they may be trumped by the state, so we'll see. Thank you. So moving on to general business. Dave, take it away.
Okay, first item is the amended fiscal year 2015-16 budget process timeline. We met with the Finance Committee on March 3rd, and we talked about our budget process, and the Finance Committee felt it would be a good idea for us to have, as we have in a number of previous years, a dedicated workshop with the board on the budget and on the prospective rate increase. So that was one piece of input we got from the Finance Committee, and we have scheduled that meeting for 3 o'clock on March 31st. So that'll be here, it'll be public, and we're going to videotape it, because there was some feeling on the part of the Finance Committee that, regardless of our efforts to get people to engage in our budget process, and we'll do that some more this year as well, we don't get very many people to our meetings to really learn about the budget. They may come and protest, but they don't come to learn about the kinds of decisions the board needs to make. So the committee felt that it would be useful to videotape that meeting, so if people did want to.
And for the audience, it will show up on our website within, how long does it typically take?
3 days.
3 days, okay, yeah.
3 or 4 days, actually. So that was one change, and then the other thing that we decided is that we would go forward on our original schedule of presenting the draft notice of rate increase and asking the board to consider that at the regular April meeting. That is before we're going to get final word from San Francisco on next year's water availability. And if San Francisco tells us mid-April that they're going to declare a water shortage emergency, there's nothing to preclude our coming back in a special meeting at the end of April or at any time and approving a new rate increase notice. But as we'll discuss later, it seems unlikely that that's going to happen in mid-April. So that's the updated budget process timeline. And we'd be presenting the notice of rate increase to the board at the regular April meeting. We'd be on track to have the rate increase hearing and approve the CIP and O&M budgets at the regular June meeting on June 9th. And we can say with certainty that we will be proposing a rate increase. The reasons we'll get into in more depth shortly.
Thank you. Or not, I'm not sure. Good. Next item.
I'm passing around some handouts to go with slides here.
Each one of these is one, right?
Yes.
Here, that's a sequoia.
I figured it out.
That's an Acer palmatum.
We've tried to minimize the tree
I think
damage.
that's it.
Oh, we got that?
Oh, wait.
Uh,
I think you guys are doing great.
Did they go far enough?
No.
Oh, keep going.
Oh, I thought staff, you don't give them ahead of time to staff?
No. And then we can give the rest.
in the dark.
Yep.
So what happened? Oh, okay. Let's see here. So, we have issued the budget. You all got there was a request that we not necessarily give everybody all 125 pages of the budget. You can get that, you and anybody else can get that online. And we'll continue, unless somebody asks us otherwise, to follow that protocol. And we do have printed copies of the budget here for anybody who wants to request them. What we thought we'd do tonight, which is just the first presentation of the budget, is spend some time looking at some of the key changes in the expense budget. And we talked with we've met with both the facilities and finance committees. Our final decision on what the rate increase will be and how we'll finance the district, how we'll borrow, how we'll push CIP projects around to meet our financial objectives. We expect that will be the subject of our more in-depth discussion on March 31st. What we thought we'd do tonight is go through the expense budget and some of the key assumptions behind it and some of the trends that are really creating unprecedented challenge for the district and for almost all water utilities. I'm sure everybody's heard about the 30% rate increase, 31% rate increase that San Francisco is going to impose on us and all of the rest of its wholesale customers. That's part of the picture, but that's a common story in the water utility business this year for reasons we'll talk about. And when we get to March 31st, we expect that we won't have to talk about the expense budget too much. The real action will be in the CIP and in how we're going to deal with some of these increased expenses as opposed to the details of the expense budget. We thought we'd spend some time tonight, give you the opportunity to ask any questions you might have about the expense budget and go over some of the major pieces of it. The expense budget, for the most part, doesn't change a heck of a lot from year to year. But there are some important assumptions we make in developing the expense budget, which may or may not be correct, and being off in those assumptions in the last couple of years has had a pretty significant effect on everyone and really had a very significant effect on our rates. So the first sheet of the budget is this sheet with a huge amount of detail on it. one of the first things Mary has done when she's gotten here is to kind of organize this into some major categories that it makes sense to lump together. For instance, in the budget that we have always presented, if you want to see salaries, you have to look in two different lines separated by all kinds of things unrelated to personnel. So Mary's reorganized the expenses into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or so major categories. And it makes it a little bit easier for us to talk about the changes in each of those categories. In developing the budget, this is a staff effort that starts at the beginning of January, I guess. Seems like it's like Happy New Year time for the budget. Gina starts cracking the whip and handing out budget spreadsheets in January. And this first slide is one of the first things we do is say, well, our big question is how much water are we going to sell? How much water will we need to produce? And this is a very important piece of developing the budget. And this sheet that I've got up on the slide here and that you have a copy of is a very important piece of documenting our assumptions that ramify into a lot of other things, including our costs for treatment, for SFPUC water, for electricity, all kinds of things. So this sheet is something that Joe produces. He's got a special voodoo that he applies, and he says it's chicken bones. He uses chicken bones. But he's from New Orleans, or spent a lot of time in New Orleans. I guess that's where that comes from. And he turns out to be surprisingly accurate, or I should say accurate, maybe not surprisingly. And as we go through the year, in many years, it's been very challenging the last few years, though, dealing with the drop in consumption. But we start out with a question, well, how much do we think our customers are going to buy from us this year? And the assumption in the budget we've presented so far is that our customers will do about the same thing next year, or in fiscal 16, that they've done this year. So we've projected what we think the end of this year will be and said it'll be the same. For a number of reasons, that may not be the correct assumption, and we'll talk when we go into more detail at our budget workshop about some of the what-ifs. What if they use more? And we may decide to make a more conservative assumption than that. The other thing that comes out of the sheet is how much we think we'll be able to produce from our local sources and how much we'll be able to produce from Pillarcitos, because when we produce water from Pillarcitos, we're not paying PG&E to pump the water over the hill. And if you look at our monthly financials, you can see that we're about $150,000 over budget year to date for electricity at Crystal Springs. So that's a pretty big piece of our expenses. So that's where a lot of the numbers in the budget comes from. If you look at water purchase from SFPUC, if you look at the electricity costs for Crystal Springs, all of those numbers are based on this sheet. So we're saying we'll produce about 690 million gallons next year, 680, well, let's say 684. In 2007, that number the actual number was about 930. So that's how much our water use has dropped since 2007, even though we've had an increase in the number of connections. So for this budget, in any case, we're saying 16 will be the same as 15. We've said that in past years and have been wrong on the high side, and that is one of the reasons that we find ourselves in the hole. That's one of the reasons that we're falling short this year by $1 million in our contribution to capital and reserves. Part of our challenge for this year's budget is trying to get some of that back. The only alternative to doing that is to not do or to significantly delay our capital projects. So this is a sheet that's easier to look at in the page you have than on the screen, but I just thought I'd put it up there. And we don't need to go into it in great detail, but this is kind of a summary of what is on that detailed first sheet of the expense budget that you see every year. I don't think we need to spend any time right now on total revenues. The total revenues for next year are based on the assumption that we'd increase rates 10%. Well, a couple of assumptions. One, that we would end this year with about $7.9 million in water revenue compared to our budget of 8.8. We've talked about that. And then if we applied a 10% rate increase on top of that, 9.8 million would, or 8.7 million in water revenue would be the result. And added to our non-operating revenue, about 1.1 million would produce a total district revenue of about 9.8 million. That's not going to be enough. We're not going to have a 10% rate increase. We'll need substantially greater rate increase than that. But that's something we'll talk about in a bit.
Darn it, I was so excited when I read that.
So if you kind of skip down to the bottom line and look at total operating, or close to the bottom line, above capital accounts, look at total operating expenses. We're looking at a budget-to-budget increase in total operating expenses of about 1.1 million, and an increase over what we project we'll spend this year of about 1.5 million. So a very significant increase in total operating expenses. But looking back up, you can pretty quickly see that almost all of that is in water and the electricity, in water purchased from San Francisco, and in the electricity it takes us to bring that water over to the coast. We're projecting water purchase costs, including electricity, of about 3.7 million. This is an unprecedented number and represents an increase of around $1 million. Well, it's almost $1 million budget to budget, and it's over $1 million more than we will have spent this year. So, as we'll show in a bit, that is really driving, that increase is really driving our, a major part of our increase in rates. If you look at all the personnel expenses together, the budget to budget increase is about 5%. So that's that's about normal. That's the result of cost of living adjustments, and it's a good part of the difference in personnel is that this year's budget has the assistant general manager position budgeted for the whole year, and last year was only 8 or 9 months. So that's a lot of that. There's nothing unusual happening in the personnel budget, and the increase there is fairly minimal. So those are really the big changes. Well, personnel not so big in this year's operating budget. We thought it'd be interesting to look at how the costs in the operating budget have been distributed from year to year. And the next page compares, starting with the right, 11, starting with fiscal year 12, fiscal 12, 13, 14, and 15. And we show what percentage of our total expense, percent of expense, including debt service, those cost components represent. And just to skip to the picture, this is what it looks like. You can see that we've experienced a pretty dramatic increase in total costs from a little over 7 million to 9 million just in the last 5 fiscal years. And what this shows is that it's the cost of water. And this is no surprise, but it's something everyone, including our customers who will have to pay increased rates, need to appreciate. The cost of water has become a huge part of our budget. It's 40% of this year's proposed expense budget. In fiscal year 12, it was 33%. And those are big numbers. And when you talk about what the district in 1991, the district's total revenue in 1991 was probably $1 million. So our total revenue requirement has been increasing dramatically. It isn't that we're using a lot more San Francisco water, it's just that it's getting a lot more expensive. We took a look at the last 4 fiscal years. In 4 years, the cost of San Francisco water has gone up over 80%, just in 4 years. And of course, every year it increases, but it's been going up very steeply. For reasons having to do with their capital program, as well as very significant decreases in water use as a result of conservation. And here are a couple of graphs that I think tell that story. I think that these are curves of actual and projected water use since fiscal 4. This is San Francisco wholesale users combined, well, on the left scale with the little diamonds, and retail users, the San Francisco retail users, on the right scale with the little circles. I think almost every water utility's demand curves follow this pattern. San Francisco, the total wholesale demand at its peak in 2007, well, actually it peaked a little higher in 4, but 2007 was our peak, also the peak here. After 2007, mainly due to economic factors, water use plunged, and it never has recovered significantly. We saw an uptick, as San Francisco did, starting with 11, 12, 13. What the right-hand part of the curve shows is the dotted lines. In February 2014, a year ago, San Francisco was projecting that fiscal 14, predicting in February that fiscal 14 would end with average wholesale customer demand of 149 MGD, and that fiscal 15, the demand would be 145. And here's what actually happened. Instead of 145, demand in fiscal 15 is now projected to be 127. And in 16, 130. So instead of 145, we're now talking about 128, 130. And we're seeing about the same thing. We asked for a voluntary 10%. We're looking at some data that suggests that our residential customers may have cut back as much as 18% in the last year and a half, which is a good news story for conservation. Great, Kathleen loves it. We on the revenue, in the revenue department are not so thrilled. And that is really the significant story. Well, a number of parts of the story are significant. A few years ago, San Francisco and the wholesale customers were going back and forth over the question of, the BOSCA agencies project that our aggregate total demand will be on the order of 200 million gallons, and San Francisco has capped wholesale water sales at 184 in the agreement with the environmentalists. And so everybody was wondering where are we going to get that water, and that's why BOSCA spent $2.3 million on this long-term reliable water supply study. That worry has essentially gone away. When Steve Ritchie talked to our BOSCA representatives last week, or when the SFPUC talked to us, basically they crossed out the part about need to find more water for wholesale customers. It just, that issue has gone away. Instead of, 2 or 3 years ago, we were arguing with San Francisco about whether the rate should be based on an aggregate purchase of 145 or 137. Well, now we've dropped way below that. So these are really dramatic numbers. And this is still focusing on the cost of San Francisco water, which is such a big story for us. This is the wholesale revenue requirement that San Francisco customers, including ourselves, have to pay. The wholesale customers are responsible for paying the wholesale revenue requirement. So the first shaded line shows the trend starting with fiscal 15 in the wholesale revenue requirement. It goes from 215 to 233 to 240, not huge increases. If you look at operating costs, you see that those are going up on the order of 3% a year, kind of like ours, kind of like our operating costs if you take out water purchase. And then debt service, which is determined by the timing of the borrowings for the seismic improvement program projects, goes up a little more steeply. A couple of things to notice about this. If you look at the debt service compared to the total wholesale revenue requirement, it's by fiscal 18, it's over half of the total wholesale revenue requirement. So our mortgage payments are half their income. And then revenue funded capital is just how much we need to put in to fund CIP that is not generally the WISIP program, the seismic improvement program. And then down below, there's some other adjustments. The balance, San Francisco always gets its money. Unlike under the water supply agreement, unlike the problem that we face, they determine the revenue requirement and make an assumption about how much water we're going to buy. At the end of the year, if we haven't bought that much water, the amount of money that buying that water would have provided them becomes a balance in the balancing account. And it also works the other way. If we buy more water than the rate calculation is based on, then we get a credit in the balancing account. So at the end of each year, we have this balancing account that either gives us back money or pays San Francisco to make up the whole wholesale revenue requirement. So you can see that from fiscal 15 to fiscal 16, if you look at the balancing account, that negative 27 is money that San Francisco owed the wholesale customers. Because we used so much less water, it tipped the other way. They're estimating it'll tip the other way by 37 million, and will end fiscal 16 owing 10 million to San Francisco. But the story is looking at the bottom line, that the amount that we owe San Francisco, which is based on how much we're going to use, is actually the balancing account is most of the difference between the first shaded line and the second shaded line. That balancing account, which is based on consumption and goes in San Francisco's favor when our consumption is lower, has gone up by $50 million just between those two fiscal years. So, that's kind of what makes up this huge rate increase that we're experiencing. There's first of all, a significant increase from year to year based on timing of debt service for the seismic improvement program. That's an old story. But then there's also this problem of we need to pay them back for consumption that's less than was predicted. This is just a history of San Francisco increases. I mentioned if you go back a few years before, this chart shows we've experienced an 80% increase over about 4 years. This negative number here was not really a negative number in terms of our effective rate for San Francisco water. This negative number happened when Bosca sold $350 million worth of bonds and refunded some of the San Francisco debt. So they saved us money in the long run, and San Francisco took that out of the rate, but we pay that money to Bosca now. So instead of a negative 16%, this shows they don't show it in the table, but it was about a minus 16% in their table. We really experienced effectively about a 9% increase that year. So it's been fairly rare for San Francisco rate increases to be in single digits. This is something San Francisco gives us each year, showing their 10-year financial projections going forward, as well as what the 10-year financial projections were last year. So you can see last year, fiscal 2014-15, a year ago, they told us our rate for beginning July 1st, 2015 would be going up 18%. Instead, it's 31%. So
Close.
they've generally, it's been fairly rare for reasons we can all understand here, for the rate increases to be less than San Francisco projects. Once we get out there, lo and behold, other things come up, more expenses come up, things like Mountain Tunnel, for $600 million, and other things that weren't on the radar when they do this table come up, and we don't really get a 5% decrease. But that's the series of rate increases we're looking at. So we still, going out another 10 years, we still face a substantial increase in San Francisco water costs, going from a rate this year of 383 to, in 2024, 523. These were numbers that nobody could have imagined, back in 2005. I mean, these look like Tier 2 retail rates, and instead they're rates for untreated raw water. But that's the business we're in. So I think it's really important to understand that as what's driving our rate increase. In general, I've said in the past that if San Francisco goes up 30%, we need to go up about a fourth of that to break even. But as the proportion of our total expense represented by San Francisco water costs goes up, so does that ratio. So And when they go up 30%, we need something like 10% just to break even. It's between 7.5% and 10% just to break even. And because many of our costs are also fixed, we get kind of a double whammy because our own customers are significantly reducing their use. So that puts additional pressure on our revenues. And we'll have a more detailed discussion of that on the 31st. But that's what really is an unprecedented challenge, even without considering the possibility that we could go into a mandatory rationing regime, which would compound the unprecedented challenge, financial challenge we face by adding a lot of operational as well as financial challenges. So that's the good news about the expense budget is everything outside of water cost is pretty stable.
Through the chair.
Yeah, please.
There's another report in here that I would love to get on television or onto our website, but it basically is talking about a 9-county Bay Area lowest per capita consumption of water, January 2005, and the least consumptive is Coastside County Water District. So I think that's really a great thing to compliment our customers and thank them for their efforts in conservation. And thank Kathleen for her amazing work as a water conservation official.
Yeah, and it kind of blows up the SFPUC's assumption when it comes to water rationing, that we're suburban and, they're all living in apartments, therefore, they've always assumed that their use is more hardened than ours. So it's going to be hard to take, 20% off that, and they're assuming that they're already at the low end. So when it comes to drought scenario, this is a little unfair to us if they were to go into a rationing scenario.
Well, we keep thinking that we've, going back to our assumption about how much our customers are going to buy, we've thought before that we must be close to the bottom, to the minimum that our customers, to the most conservation that they could do and the least water they could buy. But they pulled off even more conservation. So that's kind of why we started out with, well, how much lower could it really go? I mean, these are numbers that, while subject to some inaccuracy based on, bi-monthly billing and things like that, are really low. I don't know if the real number is 37, but the numbers are still really low, and that represents a level of use it becomes harder and harder to reduce. And I'll talk about the water supply in a minute, but the good news in that is that it has allowed us as a regional water system to stay out of rationing, even though we're in the driest period ever recorded. So we're not, we may be able to avoid rationing for some time yet, and indefinitely if it starts to rain, just because of this dramatic reduction in use. We always kind of promise people, our conservation message carries the implied promise that you'll benefit ultimately from conserving, even though there's this sort of contradiction in that, you do a good thing, you conserve, and then your rate goes up. But there's a huge difference for everyone between being in a mandatory rationing regime and being able to get by on the supplies we have without doing that. So essentially, without having to impose the kinds of restrictions that mandatory rationing would require, we're at really low levels of consumption and may be able to dodge that bullet. So that's the good news part of this, if there is any.
Well, if you look at that chart, what I find interesting is that fully more than half of the people with a 20% reduction, half of the communities, will just barely meet what we're already doing. So, you look right there, City of East Palo Alto at 46.39 with a 20% reduction, they finally get to 37, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty amazing.
Well,
And then you look at our customers cutting 20% and being at, what does that end up being? Somewhere around 30 gallons. That's amazing. And,
even the highest numbers in this chart are very low numbers compared to per capita usage statewide or any place else. What's the statewide number, too? It's 150, 200?
During normal?
Yeah,
Yeah,
normal.
it's over 200.
Yeah.
During
Wow.
So that's why we get to ship them.
So these are very low numbers and represent a really successful effort by all the users of the regional water system to reduce use in response to the SFPUC's request.
Gives you a lot of pride, doesn't it?
Well,
In where we live and how people think and behave.
Yeah, we're able to do it. You see quite a lot of brown lawns. Okay, well, we don't have any, there's no action required on the budget. We'd be happy to answer questions about it anytime. This is just the first of a number of appearances the budget will make. We'll talk about it in more detail than anybody wants.
31st, 3 o'clock?
31st.
Good. Thank you very much for that preview. Help set up our special meeting on the 31st.
Bring your calculator.
Bring your calculators. Let me do general manager's report. Anyone have any?
So this is the first slide of we talked about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we talked
That was
about
in
this.
our packet
Yeah, I thought
earlier,
this was, some of this is just from the hydrologic conditions report that you have, and out of Steve Ritchie's presentation on the 5th, I mentioned in my staff report that Steve Ritchie was in spite of the data he presented, appeared to be more optimistic, just based on this very low level of use, that we could go at least through this calendar year with continuation of the 10% voluntary reduction, which would be huge for us in terms of our ability to handle what's coming. Even if we do go to rationing, if it could be put off until 2016, we would be much better prepared.
Well, if we just had Calaveras online alone, the difference would be phenomenal.
Here's an interesting chart he presented. In spite of the optimism, there's really not a lot of good news. Any way you look at our current situation, it's drier than it's ever been, and this shows that this is the worst consecutive 3 years in any time that the city has recorded this data. The last time there was mandatory rationing was in 1991. There was a pretty extended drought there. I think it was in '92 that we had the Miracle March. But at that point, I was looking back at some old information. San Francisco had actually asked for a 50% mandatory rationing. So it had gotten really bad then. Even though we're in the worst 3 years, though, this dramatically lower consumption allows us to still get by. This is an interesting chart that he showed a number of times, and I don't know how this fits in with his optimism about avoiding mandatory rationing. But
Blue line's going to need this.
in terms of water available to San Francisco from the Tuolumne, so far year to date, they are above last year. That's good news, but well below the 230 I think this must be thousands of, yes, 230,000 acre feet that they say they'd like to, that threshold they'd like to get to avoid potential additional action, whatever the heck that is. That would be meant. Additional action might be a voluntary 20%, might be mandatory rationing, might be something, but we are definitely not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of water supply. And second item was just, as you can see, we're back in our building. Hooray.
Well done. Are there any outstanding issues with the
Oh,
building?
Yeah, there's a punch list of a few things, but no huge issues, no major issues.
And is the new layout working better than the old?
We have another office, which we never had before. We have an operations center. You can go in there now and see how many gallons a minute are going through Denniston. So it's not ideal. Obviously, this is, we'd like to have more space, but I think this will work to meet the district's needs. So in that sense, yes, it's a significant improvement. And a lot of things about the building work better.
I like it when you
The-
walk in, the front entrance
Yeah,
seems
that's-
really nice. When you, as a customer walking in,
Right.
it seems like, are the customers liking it, or?
I don't know, have we had anybody jumping for joy? Usually they're mad when a lot of them are mad when they come in, especially this time of the month. We're about to hang our door tags, they've gotten their late notices. So, but we have heating that works, we have nice light.
The lights are great.
Yeah, we have a lot of things we didn't have before.
Good, so we're here so we can say goodbye to the trailers as we leave tonight.
The 12th they go. Huh?
Yeah, they're out of here.
Oh, no, day after tomorrow.
Good, thank you for that. And anyone have any questions on the superintendent's report? Let's see. I had a question. Assessment revealed significant damage to the surface watch system at Denison?
Yeah, all of our upgrades that we did last year were mainly focused on pre-treatment and the ability to make that plant more forgiving. We do an assessment annually of the filters, and we have lost a significant amount of green sand and the laterals that screw into the header for the surface wash system. The header itself is corroding at the threads, at the bung. So we have to go in there and get that fixed in order to keep those filters running as efficiently.
Is that something we can do in-house, or do we have to bring a contractor in?
No, it's very difficult. It's an extreme confined space there. We just don't have the expertise for that, and there are outfits that are very, very good at this.
Our guys don't fit through the hatch.
Yeah, you have to fit through the hatch for one thing, that's right.
May take some heat when the guys see this tape. All right, no, thanks for clarifying that. Anyone else have any questions on this?
I just wondered when the auction was going to open on the Hazen's tank?
For the redwood,
Yes.
that will be discussed in the future.
I plan on submitting an offer.
I think that's going to go, that could offset the budget reality.
It might.
I had one other question for you. I was confused about the Water Resources Control Board, this Karen Nishimoto.
That's correct.
How often do you speak to that person?
Lately, more often than in the past, she is our new sanitary engineer over us, and she likes us. She's concerned about us, and so she's just been keeping the lines of communication open.
Great. And the...
She had a couple of questions this last
Yeah, what are
go
her
around.
concerns?
Yeah, the well destruction, I was curious about that.
Oh, yeah, the wells. Well, what we have on their list of active and non-active wells is different than reality. And it comes about when it's time to take samples. We have a number of wells that we just can't get running. But since they're listed as active in their books, we're required to sample them for various and sundry things. Well, we can't sample them because they're broke. And so I just explained to her, look, we have a plan. We would like to, as part of our capital improvement program, to abandon 3 of these wells that just, they're tilted, or they're full of iron, or the gravel around those wells was worn out, and it's just time for new wells. We would like to, abandon these and possibly drill one well with a nice new larger capacity that we could just take care of and supplement our Denniston source, and as well as Pilocitos.
And is she...
So that was one question that she did have asked.
And she's not really a permitter for work like that, is she?
No, that's up to us.
Yeah, I see.
Yes.
Thanks. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that can't be that unusual that a water district has wells that are no longer serviceable, and we'd be
Right.
crazy to abandon them without getting permit to replace them.
Absolutely.
So
And
I
that's-
think in the real world, she'd be understanding of that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
She's very good with that.
The state of California has 16,800 potable water wells serving public water
Yeah,
systems.
and I doubt every single one of them's operational. Or a pretty safe assumption. Good.
I have one question.
Please.
On your meeting with the landowner around Hazen's Tank, were there any issues that you were concerned
No,
about?
he's a very nice fellow, very amenable. I explained to him exactly, well, not exactly, but what he could expect. And that's basically, we're going to have to improve the access, which is not really a road at this point, but we're going to have to make it kind of a pseudo road to bring up the materials for this welded steel tank. I don't know if you've ever been up to Hazen's Tank. There's a road right above that, which is on his property. It's kind of, and it dead ends right there, as a matter of fact. And I asked if, since it's nice and flat, if the contractor, if they need to, if they could store stuff there during the construction. He was okay with that. And I asked him what kind of fence he wanted, what kind of gate. There's a gate there at the bottom, and he said, well, I always thought it was your gate. So, that's an easy pass, so we'll improve. We definitely need to improve. And we didn't improve the gate because we figured it was his gate. So we'll have a nice gate that's much easier to operate.
Great. Good, thank you. And I see the cross-training here is continuing with our employees. So how many backhoe operators will we have then? Yeah.
Well, everybody could operate the backhoe. It depends on, it's just a matter of how well they operate the backhoe. Right now, we have two individuals that we could depend on to do a good job, because it's dangerous to operate a backhoe. I mean, there's stuff underground that we have to be aware of, and we don't want to bust our pipes in the process of fixing them. And then we're looking for a pipeline over on Leia's farm, and a lot of it's kind of trial and error. And we just discovered some old maps in this move. We found the actual map that shows that thing that's been eluding us for
the possible bottleneck?
possible. Yeah. So we have Logan's out there practicing, because what can he hurt? And so it's a really, really good opportunity.
No, that's good. I mean, we've always been a well cross-trained this district here.
Yes, and we have our former maintenance worker that was transferred over to being a treatment distribution operator is training at the treatment plant. So we'll have all of our field staff able to run either plant whenever we need them to.
Yeah, good. That looks great. Thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah, so was this last article put in as humor?
Pictures of Kathleen's report?
This isn't Kathleen's,
Oh.
is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it is
Yeah,
Kathleen.
yeah,
Oh,
that is
sorry,
Kathleen's.
okay.
Okay.
Why would you think it's?
Picture of snow.
No,
No.
it's the new stronger tunnel.
Oh, after it collapsed?
No, they put poopy water into the water system when they turned on the tunnel.
Kathleen?
Needed some cross-training, I guess.
Yeah, they were
They
clearly
opened
the
the
ones
wrong
well
valve,
trained
yeah.
as we are here.
Yeah.
The reason the article's in there is just in the previous board meeting, there were questions about the status of the WISIP program. So I thought article was pretty good to kind of
Great.
give an update on the WISIP program.
That tunnel's amazing. You've seen it, haven't you? You
No.
never went there?
Yep.
Oh, it's unbelievable. They were hand digging portions of it, digging it with small equipment. I mean, it looked like a mine tunnel when they were starting. And it's amazing how modern and
Yeah.
slick it looks, isn't it? Yeah.
I was impressed.
Yeah, we walked in that tunnel. We went in that tunnel.
Had a tour of it. So besides my staff report, there's been a recent development. So the State Water Resources Control Board is going to consider changes to the emergency drought regulations on March 17th. So State Water Resources Control Board staff is recommending that there be a prohibition on irrigation of turf or ornamental landscapes during and 48 hours following measurable precipitation. They would like to make it mandatory that water only be served on request in restaurants and bars. And they would like to make it mandatory that operators of hotels and motels offer patrons the option of not having their towels and linens washed daily. They would like urban water suppliers to limit the number of days of outdoor irrigation to no more than 2 days per week. They want urban water suppliers to promptly notify their customers when they're aware of a leak within the customer's control on the customer's property. And also there will be additional reporting requirements for the urban water suppliers to the state, and some clarification. So we'll find out on March 17th if the board adopts those recommendations by staff. And if they do, then it will mean that we'd have to pass another ordinance to include these new restrictions in our water shortage. So at that point, we'd evaluate if we need to go to the next stage in our water shortage contingency plan. So currently, we're at stage 2, and so we would look and see if we need to go to stage 3 or not after. Okay. Any questions?
No.
St. Patrick's Day, I guess there'll be no water in the Irish whiskey at the meeting.
As it should be.
I was gonna say.
Or ice.
On that note, any requests for future agenda items? I think we're going to cover the most important agenda item at the end of the month, so reconvene
I'd
on
like
the
to
31st.
I'd like to compliment Joe and in his work with all the agencies. You know, for so many years, we never really had anybody that was doing great public relations with the people that look over us. And I think he's just done an amazing job of
You
building
haven't made anyone cry yet.
building those
No,
relationships, you know? I mean, I'm just
Must
so
be-
proud of the fact he
Not yet.
speaks to these people and connects. I just think it's great.
No, well, in our time here, that is a very big change. We would know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a huge change.
Dave? Any comments? Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed your first meeting here, Mary.
I did.
Thank you all for watching, and anyone interested in seeing where the rates are going, please join us on the 31st at 3 o'clock. Thank you.